Hello everyone. Next, I will share the cardiovascular anatomy to you. The cardiovascular system is composed of the heart, blood vessels, and blood in the heart cavity, and blood vessels. The blood vessel part is composed of arteries, capillaries, and veins. Throughout the course of life activities, the heart keeps beating, pushing blood to the circulate in the cardiovascular system, as shown in the picture. The heart is a hollow muscular fibrous organ, shaped like an inverted cone, surrounded by a pericardium, diagonally located in the thoracic cavity and mediastinum. The heart is divided into left and right halves by the cardiac compartment. Each half of the heart is divided into 4 cavities: left and right atrium, and the left and right ventricle. The expiratory atrium and ventricle are connected by the atrioventricular orifice. The atrium receives the veins, and the ventricle sends out the arteries. There are valves at the mouth of the ventricle and the mouth of the artery. Each valve is like a valve of pump, which can be opened downstream and closed upstream to ensure blood flow in a single direction. The normal weight of an adult is about 300 grams. The heart beats continuously, about 75 times per minute, 10,000 times a day, and the bleeding volume per contraction is about 70 ml, about 7,200 liters a day. Remove metabolic byproducts. Adjustment of oxygen and nutrient supply in different physiological states. Regulation of body temperatures. Human communication. The blood is pumped out from the left ventricle through the aorta and its branches to the capillaries of the body, where the blood exchanges substances and gases within strong tissue and cells, and then passes through various levels of veins, and finally through the superior vena cava, inferior vena cava, return to the right atrium. This circulation route is called systematic circulation. The blood is pumped out from the right ventricle, passes through the trunk of the pulmonary artery and its branches to the alveolar capillaries of gas interchange, and then enters the right atrium through the pulmonary vein. This circulation route is called pulmonary circulation. Systematic circulation and pulmonary circulation proceed simultaneously. The heart is divided into left and right halves by the heart compartment. The hypoxic venous blood in the right half of the heart turns into oxygen-rich arterial blood through the pulmonary circulation and return to the left half of the heart. The oxygen-rich arterial blood is in the left half of the heart, supplies the whole body through capillary blood vessels. It becomes venous blood and flows back to the right hemiheart. The right hemiheart includes the right atrium, right ventricle, and the hypoxic venous blood. It receives venous blood from systemic circulation via superior and inferior vena cava into right atrium, pumps blood to pulmonary circulation and left ventricle from right ventricle. The left half of the heart includes the left atrium, left ventricle, and oxygen-rich arterial blood, and received oxygenated blood from the pulmonary circulation, also pumps blood into systematic circulations. The tricuspid valve, also known as the right atrioventricular valve, is located between the right atrium and the right ventricle. It has 3 leaflets with the tip pointing to the ventricle. The mitral valve is also known as the left atrioventricular valve, is located between the left atrium and the left ventricle. There are 2 valve leaves point towards the ventricle, and the ventricle contracted to prevent blood from flowing back to the atrium. 3 half-moon-shaped pulmonary valves are seen in the left and right ventricular outflow tracts. The ventricular constrict the main pulmonary valves opens, and the blood flows into the corresponding pulmonary artery. The role of the heart valves prevent background regurgitation, such as the pulmonary valves. When the right ventricle contracts, blood rushes through the pulmonary valve and into the pulmonary trunk. When the right ventricle dilates, the pulmonary sinus is filled with backflowing blood, causing the 3 valves to move closer to each other, and the pulmonary orifice close tightly to prevent blood from flowing back into the right ventricle. Next, we are going to learn the following: the heart as poem, electrophysiology, and physiological characteristics of the heart, vascular physiology, regulation of cardiovascular activity, organ circulations, the rhythmic contraction and relaxations of the heart's driving effect on the blood is called the heart pump function. The contraction of the heart injects blood into the arteries and distributes the blood to the tissue of the body through the arterial system. The relaxation of the heart returns blood to the heart through the venous system. Prepare for the next ejection. When a normal adult is quiet, the heart can pump 5 to 6 liters of blood per minute. A mechanical activity cycle composed of contraction and relaxation of the heart is called the cardiac cycle. The cardiac cycle usually refers to the activity cycle of the ventricles. If the heart rate of a normal adult is 75 beats per minute, each cardiac cycle lasts 0.8 seconds. In the active cycle of the atria, first the left and right atria contract for about 0.1 seconds, and then the atria dilate for about 0.7 seconds. In the ventricular activity cycle, the left and right ventricles contract first, lasting about 0.3 seconds, and then the ventricles diastole, lasting about 0.5 seconds. During the first 0.4 seconds of the ventricular diastole, the atrial are also in diastole. This period is called the global diastole. In a cardiac cycle, the activities of the atria and ventricles are carried out in a certain order and time course. The activities of the true atrial and ventricles are carried out simultaneously, and the systolic period is shorter than the diastolic period. Take the left ventricle as an example to illustrate the process of certain vascular injection and fill in a cardiac cycle in order to understand the mechanism of heart pumping. After the ventricle begins to contract, the pressure in the ventricle rises immediately. When the intra-atrial pressure rises to exceed the intra-atrial pressure, the atrioventricular valve is pushed to close it, but at this time, the intraventricular pressure is still lower than the aortic pressure, so the semilunar valve is still on the closed stage. The ventricle temporarily becomes a closed cavity. The period from the closing of the extravascular valve to the opening of the aortic valve. The contraction of the ventricle content changes the volume of the ventricle, so it is called the isovolumic contraction period, which lasts about 0.05 seconds. Ejection period. The semilunar valve opens when the ventricular contraction increases the internal pressure to exceed the aortic pressure. This marks the end of the volumic systole and enters the ejection period, which can be divided into two phases during the speed of the injection. Rapid injection period. In the early state of ejection, it lasts about 0.1 seconds because the blood in the ventricle quickly enters the aorta. The ventricular volume is rapidly reduced. However, due to the strong contraction of the ventricular muscles, the intravascular pressure continues to rise and reaches its peak volume, and the aortic pressure also rises. Slow the injection period. In the late period of injection, it lasts about 0.15 seconds. During the slow injection period, both the intraventricular pressure and the aortic pressure gradually decreases from the peak. High kinetic energy, so the reversible pressure gradient continues to enter the aorta. The ventricular diastolic period can be divided into isovolumic diastolic period and ventricular filling period. It's closed, but at this time, the intravascular pressure is still higher than the intra-atrial pressure, so the atriovascular valve is still closed, and the ventricle temporarily becomes a closed cavity. During the period from the close of the semilunar valves to the opening of the atrioventricular valves, the ventricle diastole and the volume of the ventricle does not change, so it is called the isovolumic diastolic period, which lasts 0.06 to 0.08 seconds. ventricular feeding period. As the ventricular muscles relax, the intraventricular pressure further drops. When the intravascular pressure drops below the intraatrial pressure, the blood in the atrium rushes through the atriovascular valves and enters the ventricle, entering the ventricle feeding period. The ventricle feeding period can be divided into a rapid feeding period and a slow feeding period. The rapid feeding period at the beginning of the atriovascular valve opening due to the rapid relaxation of the ventricular muscles. The intravascular pressure is significantly reduced and even becomes a negative pressure between the atrium and the ventricle. A large pressure gradient is formed. Blood flows into the ventricle rapidly, and the volume of the ventricle increases rapidly. So this period is called the rapid feeding period and lasts about 0.11 seconds. 2. Slow feeding period. As the blood feeding volume in the ventricle increases, the pressure gradient between the atrium and the ventricle gradients decreases, and the speed of the blood entering the ventricle also slows down. Therefore, this period of vascular diastole is called the slow feeding period, lasted about 0.22 seconds. That's all for this lesson. Thank you. See you later.